What's going on, Colts Nation? With the Colts playing on Saturday night, the Wednesday walkthrough ended up being on Tuesday. So these injury reports are going to be a little ahead of schedule compared to what they normally are, just like Steelers week a couple weeks ago. So what we have here, we're going to start with the Texans, where we have Will Anderson at the top of this, who did not practice. In fact, everybody that we're going to name here did not practice. So when I mention them, just know they did not practice on Tuesday. And for the Texans, I don't know if these are walkthroughs. I assume that every team is probably doing walkthroughs on Wednesdays by now. And again, it's Tuesday, but essentially the same thing, right? This is the Wednesday of the game week, essentially. So again, starting here for the Texans, Will Anderson not on the field. Fullback Andrew Beck also not able to practice for the Texans. Noah Brown, the wide receiver, some wide receiver depth there for the Texans. He was unable to practice. Couple of defensive tackles, Malik Collins, Sheldon Rankins. Those are starters for the Texans. They were unable to practice, one with a hip injury, one with an ankle injury. Jonathan Grenard, defensive end, out with an ankle injury. So you have the entire starting defensive line for the Texans all unable to practice on this Tuesday. So we'll see what happens going forward. I assume some of these guys are going to play, right? It's a huge game coming up. This is a game where guys are going to push as hard as they can to be able to play. I would expect a lot of these guys to end up playing. But again, not a Texans fan. I'm not a Texans reporter. I don't know the ins and outs of these injuries. I didn't watch the Texans game, didn't pay attention to it. I just know they ended up winning 26-3, I believe, against the Titans. So we'll see what happens with this. But again, the entire defensive line for the Houston Texans not practicing the first day of the week. Okay, and you also have an offensive lineman for the Texans, Laramie Tunzel, who did not practice due to a groin injury. And first time we ended up playing the Texans, Laramie Tunzel was out. I believe the Colts had 6 sacks in week 2. And of course, these are two very different teams from the beginning of the season. A lot has changed. We're in very different circumstances than what was expected for both these teams. So we'll see what happens with Laramie Tunzel. Groin injuries can be tricky, especially for offensive linemen and the way they have to move and as much weight as they carry around on those legs. So we'll see what happens there. And then another wide receiver here for the Texans, Robert Woods, with the hip injury. So a lot of guys here not practicing on the first day of the week for the Texans. And again, we'll continue to update that as the week goes to see what everybody's doing. Okay, but then as we go to the Colts here and we look at the Colts practice report, of course, this one is a walkthrough. The Colts on Wednesdays been doing walkthrough. Wednesday this week is Tuesday. So with walkthrough estimations, you have Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, both did not practice. Okay, and both of those are ankle injuries. These are going to be major key factors into what happens this week. We need both these guys to be able to play. Okay, it's a long season. Guys have played through a lot, and we're going to need these guys to make it into the playoffs. Okay, the Texans are not a team to take lightly as long as CJ Stroud is in at quarterback. We cannot afford to miss a bunch of guys, especially a bunch of offensive linemen. Okay, because not only do you have Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson both out, but you have Braden Smith, who he was able to play, but he was a limited participant with a knee injury. And I did hear that after the game against the Raiders, he was caught kind of in the bowels of Lucas Oil Stadium, leaned up against the wall in a great deal of pain. So we'll see what happens there. This is guy's been battling through injuries all season long, made it work to be able to play in the game. But we'll see if he's able to go against the Texans in Week 18. All right, now a guy that ended up going because Kenny Moore sat out was Chris Lamons. Chris Lamons, usually on special teams, but he ended up playing that slot position while Kenny Moore was out and did an okay job. But he did not practice, or was marked as did not practice, with an ankle injury. And the guy that he replaced, Kenny Moore, who ended up not practicing Friday of last week, looked like he got hurt in practice, I'm assuming, and turns out he would be marked as a limited participant in Tuesday's practice this week with the back injury. So hopefully he's able to go. I did hear or did see something on Twitter where it looked like there was optimism in the fact that Kenny Moore would be able to play. I assume with the veteran player, they're just going to let him continue to be limited, or have a G day coming up to where he doesn't have to practice. You know what I mean? Just try to get him to the game is, I think, the mode that we're going to be in right now. Okay, and a name that's going to be interesting to continue to watch is going to be Zach Moss, who was a limited participant a couple times last week before not participating on Friday and subsequently not playing in the game. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Zach Moss. Does he end up practicing more this week? And do they end up allowing him to play in the game? So we'll see what happens. Trey Sermon's been filling in nicely behind JT. JT been doing his thing, had a 100-yard game. So it'd be nice to have Zach Moss back, but this is one where we might continue to be able to wait and see what happens. But also, right, if the Colts come out and lose, now they expect to win, but this could be the last time we see this team, could be the last time any of these guys see the field this time in this season. So maybe you let Zach Moss come back, show off a little bit more for other teams so that he can go into the offseason on a little bit of a high note. But again, we'll see what happens there. We also have, as we move down here, the rest of these guys marked as full participants going into the first practice here. And it's Taven Bryan with the calf injury, Isaiah Land with the hip injury, Tyquan Lewis with the back injury, and Cameron McGrone, who missed last week because of an illness. All four of these guys, full participants, are marked as full participant as an estimation through this walkthrough. So right now with both teams, there's kind of a lot up in the air. There's a lot of questions that are going to need to be answered throughout the week. And due to the day job, whatever the practice report is for tomorrow, we won't have until Thursday, but I'll wait until the Thursday practice report comes out, and then we'll do the pregame preview where we go through all the injury reports, right? So we'll have Wednesday and Thursday together we'll have the full week for both teams. And we'll just do it all together, all at one time. But with tomorrow being Wednesday, there is a plan, as we do with most Wednesdays. So go ahead and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you get notified when that video and any others do come out. I appreciate you guys sticking by me. And as always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and go Colts.